Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we may be in the early stages of our final year trying to save these Oakland A's as we have been renewed for just 1 year and feeling like we're in a bit of a prove-it season with owner John Fisher. Do feel like we've made some progress this offseason in improving the team. Recently made our two most significant signings of free agency, picking up Shane Baz and Mr. Sajasi, the third baseman, on 1 year contracts as they had both lingered on the free agent market. So given that we don't really have any money for extensions, the fact that they had both lingered long enough that they were willing to accept 1 year deals worked out very well for us as we try to get this team hopefully somewhere in between of what we did 2 years ago when we won 94 games and what we did last season where we only won 71. Would certainly love to get this team back up over 500 and hopefully be in the race for a second playoff appearance in 3 years when we get to late September. But a lot more work to do before then. We're a little over a week into free agency, or not free agency, we're a couple months into free agency at this point, but we're a little over a week into the preseason period. So spring training is going to be coming up 3 weeks from today will be the start of spring training. I don't think we're going to do too much the remainder of free agency. Hopefully we'll be able to ultimately sign a couple of guys that we like to minor league contracts to bolster our roster. But with the fact that we're already up to 40 players on the 40-man and we like this team in general, I think the only potential trade or free agency path that we'll pursue with someone on a guaranteed major league contract right now is likely to be for a left-handed pitcher, as we only right now have 3 lefties who I anticipate will be on our 26-man roster, and I wouldn't mind a 4th lefty to help us out of the bullpen. But other than that, I think we're going to be pretty judicious in how we spend the money that we have left. Ultimately think we'll probably go into next season with perhaps a bit more than the $16 million we have today in our scouting budget, and likely somewhat less than the $40 million in player development. Probably will also up the draft budget a bit and still hopefully have a decent amount of money available for additions as we get into June and July, because hopefully we will have this team positioned where we can be buyers as the trade deadline approaches and have this team competing to get back into the playoffs, as I talked about earlier. And we're just a few days away from the start of spring training. Still certainly some pretty interesting pitchers out there. Our former stopper/starter Mason Black, Aaron Savale. When we think about lefties, Mason Flaherty, Mackenzie Gore, Patrick Sandoval, and Gabe Spire, among others, are still out there, but they're still all looking for guaranteed major league contracts, so we're going to continue to be patient. Similarly with the position players, a lot of guys that we've looked at and talked about still out there, including several of the outfielders we've been eyeing. Reunion with Brayan Belvis, Alexander Canario, Johnny DeLuca still out there. Hunter Goodman still out there. Eloy Jimenez still out there. And along with many others, Joey Weimer also there as well. So my hunch is that some of these guys are going to get more willing to accept a minor league contract in a few days when spring training officially begins. So hopefully we'll be able to find another few guys to bring in on very attractive terms for the Oakland A's to round out our crew that's going to be in spring training, and in some cases hopefully compete for a spot on the major league team, and if not, certainly serve as depth for us in AAA, possibly even AA. And as we head into the final 4 days before the end of the significant sessions in the development lab, we're a little better off than we were before. At the end of the last episode, we had 4 out of 8 programs on track or excelling. Jake Ortega is now on track with his plate discipline as well. So Albright and Pennyman and Shepard continue to struggle. Rodas and DeCaro continue to excel, and Marston, Sterling, and now Ortega are on track. So if we can get 5 successful programs when all is said and done out of the 8 that we ran, would not be the worst result here in 2030 to 2031 in the Oakland Athletics Development Laboratory. And here, as we're ready to get spring training underway, you can see Hunter Goodman, Alexander Canario, Johnny DeLuca, among others, are guys who are willing to at least consider minor league contracts at this point. So feel like we're going to have a good opportunity to bring another guy or two into camp who may be able to compete for a spot on our roster, and at the very least give us some better organizational depth for the inevitable injuries that I'm sure will happen at some point during the upcoming season. And with just 1 day left in the lab, got some bad news potentially. Duncan Marston is all of a sudden frustrated with his progress, so it's very conceivable with just 1 day left we're only going to end up having 4 successful programs, but we'll cross our fingers that Marston, who had been doing pretty well working on his pitch movement throughout the offseason, will end up making some progress for the former number 4 overall pick in the 2024 draft. And unfortunately, things really soured for us over the last couple days. Not only was Duncan Marston ultimately not successful, but Jake Ortega was not successful either, and it looked like he was on track as of yesterday. So when all was said and done, only 3 successful programs. I guess one positive thing is that there were no disastrous programs, so nobody really got any worse. And of our 3 successful programs, 2 of them were outstanding. Levi Sterling allegedly increased his pitch movement, although according to our scout, there's no noticeable changes. Outstanding result from Juan Rodas in his quality of contact. His potential and current BABIP rating both improved. And then Jason DeCaro, the new addition last year, his potential curveball and his current curveball both improved by 5 points, which should hopefully help his stuff going forward, although he's still listed at 50 out of 55. But honestly, we're hoping for more than 3 out of 8 programs to be successful. I guess we'll be glad that it doesn't seem like anybody really regressed, but certainly we're hoping for bigger returns out of the development lab here in 2030 to 2031. And we are going to run one more round of the quick programs. Hopefully these will be a much higher success rate since they're much simpler programs. We've got several players working on improving their defensive skills, and then 3 guys also working on base running fundamentals. So hopefully we'll get some positive results here in the brief programs that we still can complete before the start of the 2031 season. And we've made it to the end of spring training. Pretty mediocre 12-13 result for the A's, but we also were playing around with our lineups a lot, playing around with our pitchers a lot, and just trying to get people some practice in some different positions and get exposure to some of the new guys on our team fighting for roster spots. The good news is that nobody is banged up at all as we leave spring training, so we're going to get to hopefully go north with the 26 players that we would prefer to have. One small piece of bad news, first baseman Tyler Soderstrom just suspended for the first 3 days of the season after a called third strike. So the 2029 American League batting champion will be out of the lineup for the first 3 games of this upcoming season as he tries to continue the excellent run he's had over these past 3 years with 30-plus homers 3 consecutive years, including over 100 ribbies each of the last 2 seasons. And with 4 days left until the season begins and we finish up in the development lab, only on pace for 50-50 success rate. You can see we've got number of on-track people being 4, and the number of frustrated people is also 4 with these simpler, we thought, programs that they are working on here in the final days of spring training. And as we get ready to make some cuts, not just in our pitching staff, but across the entire roster, we'll take a look at our pitching staff. As we often do, went with 6 starters in spring training. No real surprises here. We're going to go with Ferris, Burns, Boz, DeCaro, and Miller as our starters. Miller was not great, but he's probably still at this point the most accomplished and veteran pitcher in our rotation. Duncan Marston, the youngster, gave him an opportunity, although there was really nothing except injury that was going to have him end up in the rotation. And quite honestly, if we needed a player in the rotation because of an injury to one of the top 5, it's very conceivable that a Caden Dana or a Joe Rock would still have gotten that spot over Mr. Marston. And as anticipated with our pitching staff, we're going to go with Ferris, Burns, Boz, DeCaro, and Miller in the rotation. Chase Lee back as our closer. Caden Dana, Joe Rock, and Lyon Richardson as setup men. Jordan Romano and Rule 5 acquisition Ryan Reich as middle relievers. Jose Hernandez back in a lefty specialist role. And in addition to Reich, the Rule 5 pick is a guy who certainly was not guaranteed to make the team. Cole Reagan's left-handed reliever who we signed as a minor league free agent back in February. He's going to make the team as a long reliever and an occasional specialist against left-handed pitchers to give us a third lefty out of the pen. The last 2 cuts were 2 players that were picked by us in our first draft ever with Oakland in 2024. Both Duncan Marston, who we picked 4th overall, and Levi Sterling, who we picked in the 3rd round, are going to be headed to AAA for a bit of seasoning. Very conceivable that the likes of Reich and Reagans in particular may not be Oakland A's for the long term. Could certainly be supplanted by the guys we mentioned in AAA or other guys who are in AAA. And we're going to continue to keep an eye on both the trade market and the free agent market, as well as the waiver wire coming up in the coming days. And if there's an opportunity for us to strengthen this bullpen, we're certainly going to strike on that front. Pretty happy with the rotation, but do feel like the less highly regarded guys in our bullpen are likely guys who we could find better options than potentially. And we're still struggling with what our final cut is going to be here as far as our everyday players. There's also a chance that maybe we go with 12 pitchers to start. Right now, I would say that Gabriel Gonzalez, Johnny DeLuca, and Diane Jorge, if we had to send somebody down to AAA would be the most likely candidates. But given that we have some concerns about our everyday players and we're really confident in our pitching, there is, I think, perhaps an argument to be made to keep 14 position players, go down to 12 pitchers, at least when the season is getting underway. Probably have a bit more stamina in our rotation than we normally do. Miller still a bit below average, but DeCara with excellent stamina, and Boz, Burns, and Ferris all with fine stamina for starters. So perhaps we won't be abusing the bullpen too much this season. I think a lot depends on what emerges over the next couple of days on the waiver wire as well. So we haven't quite made the final decisions to get to 26 players quite yet, and the back end of the roster could look a bit different than it does today depending on who's available on the waiver wire. And we've still got a lot of work to do with our minor league teams, which we'll be doing online or offline between now and the next episode. Obviously, we're not going to be running with 55 guys in rookie ball or 47 guys in AA ball. We did end up sending down Jake Ortega. He was in camp with us. Still looks like he's not quite ready for the majors, and his performance in AAA last year was not as stellar as the first 3 stops along the first 2 years of his major league career. So we're going to give him a little bit more seasoning before we bring him up, but he's still viewed as the number 4 prospect in baseball, and think he could have a pretty good glove, pretty good speed, and hopefully, when all is said and done, an above average bat as well. But he's still got some definite growth that needs to take place at the plate. And we've made it to opening day, had a 50% success rate with the last round of programs. Juan Rodas and Jake Ortega both improved their base running ability. Justin LeBron improved his ability at third base and broadly around the infield, so that was positive. And Tyler Soderstrom also improved his ability at first base. So 4 successful shorter programs as we finish things up. Take a look now at the preseason predictions, and our Oakland A's projected to be 86-76, so we would get back to having a winning record, which is a key goal with ownership this year, but we'd be 8 behind in the division, and our 86 wins would not earn us a wild card. Looks like you need to get to 89, at least in this simulation, to make the playoffs in the American League, but the 86-76 projection is the biggest win total that we've ever been projected to have with the A's, even though we did win 94 a couple of years ago. And we are actually going to go with 12 pitchers to start the season. So Cole Reagans, who was signed to that minor league deal, is going to be demoted to AAA Las Vegas. So only 7 arms in the bullpen and only 2 of them lefties as the season gets underway. That'll allow us to kick the can, at least for a couple days, as far as whether or not we want to go with 14 or 13 position players. And the reason why we're willing to do that is that there's a couple of lefties on the waiver wire that we like more than Reagans, given that we had a bad season a year ago. My hunch is we can probably get one of them. I'll show you the 2 guys that we made offers to here. Mason Montgomery, 30-year-old who's actually signed to a minor league contract, was waived by the Padres. Don't love the extreme fly ball tendencies, particularly with his susceptibility to give up some home runs. Last year he gave up 14 and 60 in a third innings, but we might roll the dice on him. And then we also have put in an offer on Alex Vesia, another extreme fly ball type, who also struggles to keep the ball in the park, allowed 9 home runs in 55 innings between the Cubs and the Rangers last year. But both of these guys have got better stuff and better control than Reagan's did. So we'll see whether either of those claims goes through for us. And we have also made a minor league offer to another lefty reliever, Mason Fluharty, a guy that we had been kind of tracking all offseason. He's finally willing to potentially think about a non-guaranteed contract. Don't love some of the personality traits here, but another guy who could be a useful lefty for us at some point. So perhaps we'll get him signed to that minor league contract, and maybe we'll have a few more options among lefty relievers in the not-so-distant future than we do today. And as we get ready for the start of the season, we've added a few more dollars into our draft budget to give us potentially a little more flexibility with that 10th overall pick. If there's a guy that we really like who's looking for over slot, we should be able to fit him in. Also, we'll be going into this season with a scouting budget a couple million higher than a year ago, and a development budget $1 million higher than a year ago, and enough money that we could take on some contracts if we need to. I think we do still have guys on minor league contracts who haven't been officially added to the 40-man roster yet, who may end up or will end up making the 26-man, so that number likely to be a little lower when I do all of the bookkeeping and finalization of all of the lineups and the rosters that I'll be doing offline between now and the next episode. But feel like this team definitely should have a winning record, which, as we've talked about, is a key goal for ownership this year. And then we've improved fan interest by 2 points. Unless we have a really good season on the field, hard to imagine that improving materially in the coming days and weeks and unfortunately months. And we've also been asked to upgrade center field. We do have Ortega waiting, but as we talked about, he is likely a little while away from his major league debut. A lot of that will be dependent on how the team is doing. If we're winning more than we lose throughout the first few months of the season and in the wild card race, probably no need to rush him up. If we're really struggling and or Lara gets hurt and we feel like we maybe need a jolt in the lineup, then perhaps we'll see Ortega sooner rather than later. And with that, we will call it an episode. Next time around, we'll finally be back to baseball action here in 2031. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.